Along with Bill Haisten, this is Garen Emig of the Tulsa World, couple of columnists, just talking sports here with you. And first of all, thanks for dialing us up. Thanks for reading us. We should always we shouldn't take that for granted. Thank you for making this possible. And from there, Bill, it's I guess it's what you and I want to do, and that would be to talk about something we promised we would get to last week: spring football. You watched the Hurricane scrimmage on Saturday. You've written quite a bit about the new quarterback, assuming that Brynn's going to be the guy for Philip Montgomery. And it sounds like you're as high on Brynn's prospects coming out of the scrimmage that you watched Saturday as you've been for a while. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, although, as spring games go, they're usually uneventful. And really the only time typically that you get any sort of anything really newsy out of a spring game is if you have like a really unfortunate injury but from a football standpoint, they're not very revealing and they're not very exciting. And like Philip even addressed the fans and thanked them for coming and said, this was our plan, was to be pretty bland here today. And they were. They didn't play much more than an hour, Garen, but I was able to go to a practice midweek before the spring game. And they were live most of the day and getting after it. And so that was a much more enlightening experience for me to watch Brynn that day. And furthermore, on the spring game, it was ones versus twos all day. Tulsa's got a good defense. I would love to see Brynn try to drive the field against that defense. But, it was ones versus twos. So, but yeah, I mean, I wrote about Davis last week. I watched him again in the spring game. I'm convinced and confident that he's going to really, really flourish for them. And it's really been the missing link. 2017, they weren't very good anywhere. 18, they took a big step defensively. 19 and 20, they were really good defensively. But Garen, I mean, they have ranked the last 4 seasons 8th, 9th, 10th.
Yeah.
In the conference. And so there you go. If you're just more dynamic passing the football with what they do in the run game and what their defense has become, you're in the top 2 or 3 of the conference. So, and you have a real chance to win one of these.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say they can go to Columbus and win, but can they beat Oklahoma State? That could be the heck of a game now when Tulsa plays at Oklahoma State again, because I think Tulsa is such a more complete team with Brynn.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that crazy? The missing link is quarterbacks for a guy that before he got the TU job that's the thing you probably least worried about when you brought him in, given his history at both Baylor and Houston. And, obviously there weren't any issues with Dane Evans, who really took off under Montgomery's guidance. But since that has been, it's one of the strangest narratives really in college football. I don't know how many folks are outside of our region are aware, but if only Montgomery can nail that down, you're really onto something unique. And it's just nonsensical given the track record.
Right. Well, I mean, they, I don't know. I mean, you can't pin it all on Mason Fine, but Mason Fine is always going to be a talking point. Mm-hmm. For the Montgomery years at TU, because he was an undersized but great high school quarterback at Locust Grove, the most prolific passer in the history of Oklahoma high school football, right down the street, and would have walked to the TU campus to play football at Tulsa. And instead, Tulsa signs a 6'3" kid out of Texas who just didn't pan out, but on paper looked like exactly what you want, the bigger quarterback and a dual threat guy. Anyway, and then you have, you tinker around with a couple other guys, and then you have Zach Smith for 2 years, a Baylor transfer, who I watched one night in Waco torch OU.
That's right.
Oh my goodness, Garen. He was, and I'm thinking, wow, he's going to come in here and light it up. But for whatever reason, there were flashes of he was really proficient at times, but it just wasn't sustained. And so they just haven't been a complete offense since 2016. So I think they have a chance with Davis and all those weapons in the backfield and at wide receiver. And from what I'm told, maybe the best offensive line in the American. Mm-hmm. So, and I saw evidence the other day that, of course they're going to miss Zaven Collins, but they've got they've got a Big 12 caliber secondary. They've got really good defensive backs and big defensive backs. So I'm really kind of bullish on TU for this upcoming season. Now, it's pretty tragic that they've got to play money games back to back at Stillwater and Columbus. Mm-hmm. But if they come out of that intact, mostly healthy, hopefully fully healthy, and if after that Davis Brynn, I just think we'll get traction and really get it going. And I think the next 2 years will be fun to watch with him at quarterback.
Well, it should have beaten, and Montgomery even said this, and we'll still say this, I assume, should have beaten OSU last year in Stillwater with all of their offensive deficiencies. So, yeah, it sets up reasonably well for them to at least be competitive. And speaking of, and Bill, I wanted to get to OSU real quick before we move on to basketball and specifically Bryce Thompson, but I did not go to Stillwater for the session, but I did watch the replay of Spencer Sanders with the media last night. It was his first spring availability, I do believe. And a lot of focus for good reason on his progression now that Wallace and Hubbard are gone, and he's even more entrenched with Casey Dunn and Tim Rattay and obviously Mike Gundy. Spring's a time where you don't see a lot, but you hear a lot. And what you hear, if you're an OSU football fan, is pretty good. It's Sanders, again, being mentored by Rattay and getting he was hitting on footwork in the session last night and how important that was. But anytime you hear Gundy speak about his quarterback, we're getting him more comfortable in terms of overcoming mistakes, right? We're getting his head in the right place. And that's big for any football player, but particularly a quarterback who makes the occasional misread, throws the occasional pick to get himself regathered and turn around and recover. And if Sanders is able to do that, minus a few of the mistakes, right, I think the Cowboys are going to be just fine, even without Hubbard and Wallace offensively.
Think about where Sanders must have been. I should never presume to know what a guy was thinking or where he was psychologically. Mm-hmm. But I mean, did he not? He sure seemed to be damaged goods coming out of Bedlam, right? Remember, he gets and that particular play was kind of a metaphor for that whole night for OSU. But Ronnie Perkins just ragdolls him and throws him to the ground.
Right.
And he gets dinged up. I think he banged his head a little bit, and they have to go with Illingworth for the middle two quarters. And anyway, but that night he throws for less than 100 yards. Sanders does, and he gets picked on the other side. His counterpart Rattler had a 300-yard game with, I think, he did have 4 touchdowns that night. So, that had to be his confidence had to have been shaken coming out of Bedlam, Spencer Sanders. So you can't even calculate how important it was for him to rally and play so well. Now, granted, Baylor by this point in the season had pretty well was in tank mode, and they were just looking to get to the finish line. But for Sanders to go to Waco and play as beautifully as he did, and to follow that up with the best game of his college life so far against the Miami Hurricanes in the bowl game, it's impossible to overstate the value of that, I think. And what I've been asking since January, every time I talk to anybody connected to or in the program, is how is Spencer Sanders?
Right.
And it's been unanimous that his self-esteem is really, really healthy, and that he feels like it's his program. He's the face of the place. And so, is he going to have a bad quarter in September and revert to some bad habits and cough up the football? Man, if they could just get that cleaned up, Garen, just knock down those turnovers. Holy cow. He's there's no question. He's got to be in a better place psychologically since he got there. He knows it's his team. He's going into his 4th year in the program, just like Davis Brynn is over here. And So I'll be fascinated to see whether, because they have that midseason stretch of and then back-to-back Iowa State and Bedlam back-to-back. No, I'm sorry, it's Iowa State and Texas back-to-back. And here you saw that ESPN college football index that was released yesterday. And they got OSU at ninth. They got Iowa State at fourth. Yikes. I mean, I'm like, they got LSU at like 19th. And I'm like, wait a minute. LSU just had 3 straight top 5 recruiting classes.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to believe that Iowa State is 15 spots better, and I understand there's all sorts of analytics and numbers applied to it. And it's I don't know if ultimately if it's a projection. Well, it is. It's a projection of where they're going to end up. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. What am I saying? So to have Iowa State projected as the 4th team in the playoff, that kind of blew my head off. But for OSU to be 9th, in my mind, Garen, I see them as a 15 to 20 kind of a team, not a top 10.
Yeah.
But if Spencer Sanders doesn't cough up the football, and if he has some carryover from the Cheez-It Bowl through this regular season, that's not an outlandish expectation for OSU to be a top 10 type of a team.
Yeah. All right, real quick, basketball. The news that we'd anticipated, or especially you'd anticipated for a bit, finally came down yesterday. Bryce Thompson deciding to leave Kansas. Quick question, a simple question. Where does he end up?
That's a great question. It's I don't think we'll have to wait too terribly long. I think there is a family emphasis on staying closer to home. Lawrence ain't that far away. So, I mean,
right.
If you get closer to home, that's a strong suggestion that he's probably going to play for one of the programs in state. I know the family had a great recruiting experience with Mike Boynton at OSU. I know the Porter Mosier hire at OU got their attention. And each of Bryce's parents was an athlete, a successful, decorated athlete at TU. So I would say those are, and for that matter, Coach Musselman over at Arkansas, impression on the Thompsons. So, and they're coming off a great year. So I think any team within 125 mile, isn't that what Norman is from here? 125 miles?
Right. Yeah.
There you go. I think you can draw a circle at about 125 miles, and one of those schools, because I think Fayetteville's about a mile or two closer to my place than Norman is. So, I think that's what you're looking at is OU, OSU, Tulsa, Arkansas. One of those teams is going to end up with a 5-star McDonald's All-American kid who, for a variety of reasons, it didn't work at KU, surprisingly, but it didn't. And so here he is, a free agent.
All right. We'll talk more about Thompson and spring football, touch on the Sooners and Cowboys specifically next week. Join us then. Keep reading, and thanks for your time.